Hello and welcome to a short video describing prompting, an errorless learning teaching procedure. My name is Kuehl and I've worked in the area of special education for almost 23 years. If you have any questions, please contact me using the email provided on the slide. Let's get started. There are two different ways or procedures to use when prompting students in the classroom, community, or at home. One way is to prompt using the most to least prompting procedure, and the other is the opposite, using least to most prompting. The difference in the two is the level you start with. Most to least prompting, MTL, uses a high level of support or assistance to the student when teaching a skill, and then the prompting is faded over time until a student is independent with a skill. When using least to most prompting, the adult will give the student an opportunity to perform the response with the least amount of assistance on each trial. The adult moves to the next prompt in the hierarchy if the student performs an incorrect response. Again, the goal is to teach students to be independent in completing tasks. Remember when you first learned to ride a bike? At first, an adult held on to you and the bike, and then slowly the adult held on less and less until they were verbally prompting you to keep pedaling or apply the brakes. You already know some of the components of prompting to help students learn. Let's expand on that. Prompting is used to help students become independent in completing a task. We want students to learn skills the correct way so that their brain remembers the positive process and the student sees success. Let's teach kids how to complete a task correctly the first time instead of watching them fail and potentially become frustrated or dependent. When using most to least prompting, the first level is called a full physical assist. This means that you will grab a student's hand to help them point, to raise their hand, or to help them write something while stabilizing the paper. You may also fully assist them with standing up or sitting down. The next level suggests that you back off from providing a full physical assist. As stated in the slide, a partial physical assist may be to hold onto a student's wrist or elbow as they hold their pencil and write. Providing partial physical assistance helps the student know what action they need to focus on, or can help them stabilize so they can complete a task or behavior. Modeling. This type of prompting is showing the student what you want them to do. You can pair this with a verbal prompt of first saying, "Watch me," to gain their attention. Then show them something. Model putting on your hat, opening a book to the first page, writing down the math problem on your paper. Stand quietly in line. Touch the red jelly bean switch to activate a toy or recorded message. I'm sure you've heard of visual supports. A picture of an item, a behavior, even a word is shown on a card or paper to help the student understand the next step or action they need to do. Some students are better able to follow directions using pictures than listen to verbal prompts because they may have listening processing issues. That means it may take a student longer to figure out what you are saying or asking them to do. It is easier for them to look at a picture, as their brain can process visual information faster and easier than by listening. For some students, using visuals, pictures, supports the student the best. A direct verbal prompt means stating the exact behavior you want the student to do. Hang on to the railing, stand up, say your name, wipe your mouth are some more examples than what is stated on the slide. We are almost to the least level of prompting when we talk about a gesture prompt. A gesture such as pointing, showing a facial expression, mouthing words silently, or motioning what you want the student to do provides a little nudge for any and all students to be successful and keep them on track. An adult can use a gesture with a student they are sitting next to or when they are standing across the room and the student looks their way. And the last prompt, the least intrusive, is called an indirect verbal or cue. What that means is that an adult will ask a question related to what is expected. Let's say a teacher tells the class to get out their math books. If you are a paraprofessional in the room, you will wait to see if the student you are supporting complies within timelines. Be patient and wait for them to respond. It may take some kids 10 to 15 seconds to process that information. If the student doesn't respond, the paraprofessional could ask a question like, "What book should you take out?" or "What's next?" This type of prompt, cueing, reminds the student of the first prompt from their teacher and holds them accountable to listening to the teacher. We don't want kids to ignore the teacher and become dependent on the paraprofessional for telling them what to do. Obviously, if there isn't a paraprofessional in the room assisting students, then the teacher should be the one asking the question instead of restating the directive. Don't be a broken record. So here's a visual to support you in understanding most to least prompting. This procedure implies that an adult is going to assist the student fully at first and then fade supports as the student builds on their skills. Certainly adults don't have to start prompting with a full physical assist. Adults will have to observe students and see what they can and can't do, as all students have strengths and weaknesses. This procedure is used when you are helping a student first learn a skill. As I stated earlier, we want students to learn the correct way, the most efficient way, so they can be independent. Remember, you should avoid repeating the same prompt twice. Thinking back to the previous example of the teacher telling the class to get out their math book, that was a direct verbal prompt. If the student doesn't respond, the paraprofessional should ask a question. "What book?" which is a cue. If that doesn't work, then the paraprofessional should move back up the hierarchy to either point to the math book in the desk, which is a gesture, or use partial or full assistance to help the student get out the math book. The second way of looking at prompting procedures is by starting with the least amount of prompting and adding in more intrusive prompts if necessary. We all know kids have good days and bad, just like adults. Social, emotional, and behavioral factors vary on the day, which contribute to how much support a student will need. To help you understand when you can use prompts, here are some suggestions. When a student is learning a new skill such as hand washing, tying their shoes, zipping up a coat, copying down a math problem, saving a file on the computer, etc., use prompts and fade them as the student acquires skills. You will need to watch the student to find out what part of the skill they are struggling with. This is called completing a task analysis, where you break down the task into small, sequenced, or chained behaviors. You can also use prompts when you are teaching a discrete skill, like identifying a picture or word, or even teaching a behavior. Sitting across from a student with 2, 3, or 4 pictures in front of the student, you can prompt them to touch the card of what you say. At first, you may have to fully grab their hand and point to the correct card with them. After repetition, you can fade that full assistance prompt to a gesture and point to the correct answer first before they do, making sure they always get it right. Then you can fade to just giving the verbal prompt of touch cat. When teaching students a skill of keeping their hands to themselves, you may first have to physically move the student's hand to their lap or side. As time passes, you can fade that full assistance to modeling the behavior yourself, and then to just a cue. Where should your hands be? This slide is just a repeat of what I've already said. Most people need to hear things, see things multiple times, so here I go. To implement prompting, first gain the student's attention. Then deliver a prompt. Pick from whatever level you feel is best and adjust with a different prompt as needed. Remember to allow for wait time. For some students, their brain pathways are compromised. Think of their brain as being wired like they are constantly on a detour. They will eventually get to the right spot or comply. It just takes them longer to get there, as they had to take the detour. For some students, they actually have to think about making a motor movement. It just doesn't come automatically. So that is why they too need extra wait time from you. When we see students respond correctly, staff need to reinforce that by giving the student a high five, verbal praise, or small treat. Also remember, the goal is to gradually fade prompts. When using the least to most hierarchy, if the student responds incorrectly, that's fine. Just adjust by giving them a more intrusive support so that they get it right with the least amount of attempts. Avoid repeating the same prompt. Students will zone out if you become that broken record. And the last tip is to remember not to overuse verbal prompts. There is already enough noise in a classroom. So how do you decide where to start on the hierarchy? Most to least prompting is preferable if errors have been found to impede a student's learning or to increase problem behaviors. There are some kids that get easily frustrated, so we want them to see success sooner than later. However, just remember that some students on the autism spectrum don't like to be touched, so know the student's preferences before using prompts. Most to least is typically preferred when a new student moves into the district. It usually doesn't take too long to get to know the student, though, so you may not be using prompts for long. Everyone is different. What works for one doesn't mean it will work for all. Use least to most prompting with students who make fewer errors and who show rapid acquisition when using least to most. Also, you would want to use least to most prompting with students who don't like to be touched. Modeling, picture support, gestures, and asking questions would be better types of prompts to use with students who have autism spectrum disorder or emotional behavioral disorder. Lastly, consider the task for the student. Some learners may easily answer questions with visual supports and modeling, but then require hand-over-hand support to learn the movement for a gym or movement activity. These two links are videos to watch prompting in action. Thank you for taking time out of your day to learn something new or expand on what you already know. Incorporating prompting techniques will take time, so I suggest you use one of the visuals provided with this training as a bookmark to refer to, or feel free to post the sign somewhere in the room to remind all the adults in the room. You may want to ask your cooperating teacher or colleague for feedback on how you are using prompts with the student you are working with, as the goal is to fade prompts from adults to make students be as independent as possible. Enjoy the rest of your day. There are many resources about prompting protocol. For this presentation, I use these two evidence-based websites as references.